Yeah.
Hey guys, it's Cosmic Skeptic, and I really
Hi, it's Johnny Septic.
haven't been uploading quite as much as I'd have liked to. It's actually been a bit
I've probably been uploading more than anyone would like to have me do.
crazier than I thought it would be, but I wanted to at least check in and do something that I've been meaning to do for a little while now. I asked you guys for questions for a Q&A style video a little while ago, and I quickly realized that I'm not sure that video idea can really work with the channel.
Let's get to the,
End up rambling.
the potatoes.
If I do, then maybe that would just be the title of the video. Either way, let's not waste any more time. What do you think is the best argument for an animal's right to life, i.e. arguments against killing animals for meat rather than arguments for the humane treatment of animals?
Let me actually read this question out. It's killing meats rather than... Okay. So essentially, just, that, animals shouldn't be killed at all. My response to that is that, the right to life is not a real thing, even for humans. We all have the legal right to not kill each other and blah, 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 or whatever. That's not the same thing as a universal right to life. I would argue that, a right to life is not existent even for humans. We just try to, preserve life as much as possible while still, not dying. And if there is like a quote unquote right to life, would that not be applied to all life forms, not just the ones we find cute and not just the ones that, are fuzzy and cuddly?
This subject can be a bit of a sore point, not just between vegans and non-vegans, but also between different kinds of vegans, and certainly between vegans and vegetarians or welfarists. It's this idea that, look, what's really wrong here when we're arguing about veganism? Are we saying that it's just killing animals in general that's this horrible moral abomination that needs to be abolished? Or is it more to do with the way we treat them, so that if we were to just increase their living conditions sufficiently, we'd actually be okay with killing them for food? Now, you might think that the answer is
Alright, well, this is, I haven't watched this video entirely yet. I've only watched like the first minute or two, but essentially what he's gonna start doing here is being like, well, what is veganism? And then just being like, there's plenty of kinds of veganism. These vegan kinds that, most vegans wouldn't consider vegan, like eating animals but still treating them humanely, which is what I would do, but I would never say I'm vegan because I still eat meat. And when you say vegan, that it implies usually that you don't eat meat. I know if you go by like the definition, which I would argue a lot of vegans don't even go by the definition of vegan if we're going to do that. But yeah, just lessening animal harm as much as possible. Yeah, you can do that and still eat meat, but that's not what, we socially consider veganism nowadays. But he's going to use all these like definitions of variants of veganism to make it sound as if like, not having a strong position on it is reasonable, but it's kind of just... it's a slight evasion, kinda. Maybe he will tie it in a way that I haven't got to yet, but from what I've saw so far, it's pretty much just like, maybe you can eat meat and be a vegan. It's like, no, I don't think anyone thinks that's true, but okay.
fairly obvious here. You're a vegan, therefore you can't be killing animals unnecessarily. So any kind of welfarist approach that seeks to, increase their living standards, but then ultimately still kills them, isn't an ethical thing to do. That's not going to be enough. I don't think it's quite as straightforward as that. Part of the problem is the way that the word vegan is defined. It's defined in so many different ways depending on the context. For instance, if food is described as vegan, it will usually just mean food that doesn't contain any animal products. But if a person is defined as vegan, it's someone who doesn't eat those kinds of food. But if someone...
Yeah, that's... Alright. Again, sometimes Alex here will say the same thing twice as if he's really saying something differently. Yeah, that wasn't a mind-blowing thing, but
one is an ethical vegan, then it's somebody who maybe seeks to minimize animal suffering. But if someone's an environmental vegan, then what, you see the point. There are like hundreds of different ways.
Yeah, you see the point. It's veganism isn't clearly defined, so my answer doesn't have to be clear and set. Yeah, that's kind of the point there. But maybe he ties it back.
This term. That's why I'm always fairly careful when I make videos about veganism and give talks.
I don't know, maybe there is like the ethical vegan, environmental vegan. I'd honestly say things like that where you're just adding, fucking adjectives and shit to the beginning or whatever. It's like, just say vegan. It's at a certain point, either you're vegan or you're not. Don't like say some weird shit to be like, oh, I'm technically vegan. It's like, we have a pretty clear idea of what vegan is nowadays, and it doesn't really serve any purpose to like purposely make it less unifiably defined. Unifiably defined? Fuck you.
Talks on the subject to explain exactly what I mean. I've always used a definition quite similar to the vegan societies, that veganism, ethical veganism as I see it, is a minimization to the highest extent practicable of all forms of animal suffering. Now, the vegan society includes the term exploitation. I think this is potentially quite a vague and unhelpful term because it itself is a term that has myriad definitions.
I do like that he says that. Like, the word exploitation is just a framing word. Let's be honest. Like, they're not using it to be like accurate in language. They're using it to be like, exploitation's a very powerful word, and vegans know that, and they use that to be impactful. And again, people frame things. Something I need to start pointing out to people, because not a lot of people fucking like realize it like consciously, but yeah, people will use words to make their position sound stronger than it actually is, and that's one that vegans use a lot.
So I'll stick with suffering. Now, an interesting thing about the definition that I've given here, a minimization of animal suffering, is that as long as the animal doesn't suffer, it would seem that whatever you're doing accords with this definition of veganism. So there's some argument to be made that if you did have...
Yeah, again, if you're using a definition of veganism that, like, no one really agrees is veganism, yes. Again, that's what I try to do. I try to go out of my way to buy, fucking meat that's more ethically treated during its life. I try not to eat, like, fast food. I try not to eat, at restaurants if I don't know that they have like a reputation or whatever, or they haven't tried to make some kind of effort in that regard to use healthier, more ethical forms of farming. And again, just saying ethical farming is technically vegan is really like to the point of like, so eating meat is vegan now. It's no one, even if that's a definition you can find, it's just kind of an oxymoron when we use language the way, it's traditionally used. When we have a understanding of something pretty universally, going to the extent of being like, I'm a meat-eating vegan, is like, all right, I guess I'm an atheist who believes in God. It's like, no, that's not how that works. Words kind of have a purpose. You know, they serve a purpose in terms of conveying ideas, and when you're just like, you know, this word doesn't really mean anything, it's like, are you not a vegan anymore, and you're just trying to say you are so you don't get backlash? I don't know.
Have an
Okay.
animal who lived a perfectly good life, potentially a net positive life, so it's a good thing that they came into existence, and then you killed them genuinely painlessly. That not only is this something that you're kind of allowed to do to not be a vegan, but according to this definition of veganism, that would be a vegan thing to do, because it...
Again, that very outlandish definition of veganism, that very minute little section of veganism, I guess, that, again, as someone who does what you're describing there, I wouldn't say I'm vegan in any way. Like, I'm for eating meat. I'm against factory farming, and I think the animals that we eat should be treated, you know, fairly before they are dead. And it's just, you know, the ethical way to do it, but that's not veganism. And vegans will be like, oh, well, you care about animals even vaguely? You're a vegan. Please stop. Like, you're just making like a new little weird category to trick people into thinking that they're already sort of vegan and they just need to go all the way. It's like, no, we're not vegan. That's not, eating meat is not what veganism is. And again, like, if you just make new definitions for words, sure, I'm anything you want me to be at that point. Like, dude, you can call me literally anything and be like, well, under the definition that we made up, you are. It's like, okay, sure. Yeah, it's just kind of silly. Like, even if, like, a bunch of people got together and made that definition, that definition is silly. It's a stupid fucking counterproductive oxymoron of a fucking definition. But okay, go for it.
It wouldn't be causing any animal suffering. Now, there are a few ways you might want to respond to this. Firstly, of course, it's not just the animal being killed in question. Many other animals are social creatures just like we are, and so killing them has extrinsically bad effect. It will harm other animals who are used to their presence. So maybe that's one reason.
Fair enough. Yeah, but I mean, they're probably going to feel that when the inevitable death of that animal happens anyway. And yeah, sorry to break it to you, everything was going to die regardless. You know. So avoidance of an animal, feeling the absence of another animal, that's not an avoidable thing.
Reason not to kill the animal.
Not give animal the desired right of life. Would give.
But I think
okay, that's again, that's like a rewording or rerouting. That, I mean, okay, if you're arguing that the right of life exists, I mean, that is not a horrible point. But I mean, I'm still under the impression that the right of life doesn't exist at all, even for humans. But I mean, yeah, that is something that I guess occurs when an animal dies, and it's sad. But again, they don't. I'd actually just flat out disagree with what you wrote there. Nothing has the right to not be sad. So, yeah.
Potentially more helpful way to think about this is to substitute in a human being. If you're ever having trouble overcoming some kind of vegan ethical...
Here's what vegans do. They say, oh, well, what about a human? And then, you know, you fucking say, if a human is one in agreeance, or it's worked out in some kind of deal that a human will be eaten, and in turn given a far better life than it could ever achieve on its own, Yeah, I'm fine with cannibalism. And then they just call you a sociopath or say you're a psychopath. And they're not calling names, but it's just a fucking trap. Yeah. If a human wants to do that, that is on them. But again, where they like to point out that plants aren't as complex as animals, they won't let you say that animals aren't as complex as humans. So if it's not a point in that direction, it's not a point in the other direction either, is my thing. Is if you're going to insert humans, which are on this side, and you're saying you're here, I'm over here saying, like, yeah, it's all fucking one. You can't argue that one side is nonsensical and then not go to the other, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Dilemma. It's often helpful to put human beings in the same position as the animals and see what your ethical intuitions tell you, at least on first glance. So, for example, if you're a utilitarian, if you think that minimization of suffering is just generally the moral rule that we should all be following, then someone can ask the same question about human beings. You know, it's the famous cabin in the woods experiment. If you take someone who's got no friends and no family and you kill them genuinely painlessly, in fact, we can make it even more similar by saying they were bred into existence, given a net positive life, so a good life to live, and then killed genuinely painlessly. Have you done something wrong? Now, most people's ethical intuitions scream that, of course, there's something wrong with this.
I'll let him finish this, actually.
Although utilitarianism has traditionally been quite a difficult theory to reconcile with this intuition that most of us share, that this would be wrong, because how can it be wrong if morality is just about minimizing suffering and this person's death doesn't cause any suffering? So if you want to say that, yeah, you'd be fine with killing that person in the cabin in the woods, then hey, you're being consistent, so you've got that going for you. But I think most people would want to listen to their intuition.
There you go. Okay. So you're being logically consistent, good for you, but my intuition. In what argument is that a fucking good point? In what argument, morally, fucking logically, anything, is intuition is a good point? Here's like the guy in the woods fucking scenario. I would argue, is the man fucking in agreeance to this? Is he capable of agreeance to this? There's context to all that would change my answer to a yes or no on whether or not that is moral, a little more than you gave there. But again, saying, oh, you're being logically consistent, good for you, is not a rebuttal to a logically consistent point. You know what I like? Oh, you're being logically consistent, but I don't like it, so I want to listen to my feelings. That's not a fucking point, dude. And like, as someone who I know is fucking like really smart, dude, I've heard you talk before. Like, you're not that. You know that. Like, oh, it actually hurts my brain hearing you say, "Don't trust." Like a logical argument, trust your intuition. That's not a good point ever. At any point. Because, dude, I can just say, well, my intuition tells me to fucking kick everyone in the face. That's my intuition. Like, that there's so many reasons why you can't just trust intuition. Because, one, not everyone's intuition is the fucking same. So already is like, oh, okay, we trust our intuition. What if my intuition says something drastically different than yours? Then, oh, you're just going to call me a psychopath again. Cool.
To at least some extent and say, well, I'm convinced that it's wrong to kill a human being in that context, even if it causes no suffering. So maybe suffering isn't the only metric involved. And in that case, if you have an animal...
I was just about to say, too, suffering is not really how we balance that out. Just because something is unaware that something is wrong or something wrong is being done to it, does it truly make it okay to do it? I.e., someone in a coma, is it okay to do like, harm or sexual acts upon them? No, of course fucking not. But they're not capable of understanding that it happened. That doesn't make it okay to do. So again, suffering, the understanding of sadness, the understanding that bad things happen, does not make the action done to it moral. Which, again, goes towards my point that if it is immoral to eat any living creature, that applies to all living creatures, such as plants and insects, which vegans don't want to acknowledge because they want to eat something.
And you're killing it, even if there's no suffering involved, there might still be a problem with that. I just think we need to be consistent. And the questioner asks about the best argument for an animal's right to life. We're going to have to be very careful if we want to...
A little more important than whatever the fuck we're talking about. Look at this fucking pipe. My buddy just got me this for my fucking birthday. It was a little Sherlock's home pipe. Now I can be all the way pretentious.
Apply a concept like the right to life to non-human animals. I'm not even sure that it can practically work. The reason for that is that we might think that it's wrong to kill non-human animals, or that we should minimize it as much as we can, that it's generally a bad thing, fine. But if you have a right to something, that implies a level of inviolability. That's what distinguishes a right.
Okay, again. All right, here, with right. On a philosophical level, the word right means very little. It's like you have a right. It's like, what is a right then? It's like you can go down a whole fucking weird rabbit hole of just dissecting every word if we're going that way. But like, yeah, so like nothing really has the right to life, I guess. I'm just restating that, but yeah.
Right from other kinds of moral prescriptions is that if you have a right to something, you essentially have an inviolable claim over that thing. And it doesn't matter what the other circumstances are, this thing doesn't get violated. That's what a right is. So in a human context, we have this thing called the right to life, but already this is an incomplete way of formulating this right. Because if we do have some kind of inviolable claim over something, it's not as simple as life, right? Because I have a right to life, but if I intentionally threaten your life, and the only way you can stop me is to kill me, then presuming that I'm not justified in threatening your life, you're able to kill me, right? But if I have a right to life, doesn't that mean I have an inviolable claim to my life that you can never violate, no matter the circumstances? Well, realistically, then I have something like a right to life unless I'm threatening somebody else's life or something like this. And
so, to kind of reword that a little, and like I agree with everything he's saying here, I just find it weird because I find it to be something that would be arguing my point of the right to life doesn't truly exist. It's just a social agreeance amongst, anything capable of understanding that. And again, even that is like, okay, it's just a social agreeance on a very base level, and as you can see, like there are multiple instances of where that right to life is just taken away because you're now a danger, you're now a threat, something. So yeah, like if you say a right to life, that does mean like kind of universally no one's allowed to die, which unfortunately some people put themselves in positions where it's either them or the other person or whatever, and then just the whole death is inevitable anyway. And if we have a right to life, the universe did not get the fucking memo.
And there are lots of other problems that you can add on. So there's this view within the philosophy of rights called specificationism, which is the idea that rights like the right to life are actually just shorthand for essentially book-length rights that say that might be something like the right to life except in this circumstance, this circumstance, this.
So my position is, philosophically, no, we have no right to life. Legally speaking, to contain society, make sure we don't fall into anarchy and just have people killing each other over any reason that they personally see fit, which we can't really have as a universal, what's the word I'm looking for? Policing. Just be fucking mayhem. Yeah, like the right to life exists legally, with caveats. But philosophically, no, nothing has the right to life. Nothing was guaranteed to live in the first place. Nothing is guaranteed a certain amount of time. Diseases happen, accidents happen, meteors come from the sky and fuck you in the ass until you die. Shit happens, and, you know, the right to life is not something the universe ever really gave us.
Circumstance, and as long as this is the case, and as long as this is the case, that we just express in the nice, easier to write down phrase, the right to life. So here's the problem with trying to grant that kind of...
Well, okay. See, here's the thing with that too. Life, you have the right to begin life, but you don't have a sacred right to keep that life beyond anything happening to you. And we as humans, we built a construct of which we agree to socially, to, you know, not take from life from each other, but that's not a universal law.
Inviolability, that right to life to non-human animals. As things currently stand, and this might not be the case in principle, I'm not really sure, I wouldn't want to say either way, but certainly in practice, it is currently impossible, it's not possible, to avoid killing animals in the production of food for human sustenance, right? Now, of course, we can eat plants.
Well, that, yes. But, I mean, again, I'm not someone who's going to be like, oh, well, you know, plant or animals die when planting food. It's like, that's a stretch. I'm not going to hold that against you. That's kind of silly. But again, I give the same decency to plants, which puts me in a position of I can't eat anything without taking from other life forms, which, yeah, is very sad, but, you know, you do what you have to do to survive, and I try to do it the most ethical way I can, without, you know, losing my fucking mind, without, like, going above and beyond, which I know some people are like, oh, you should, but, again, I got shit to do. I don't know. Sorry, I'm not someone who can just sit there and focus on my diet 24/7. But I do make a good faith effort to avoid factory farmed food or any food that may have been treated unethically. I mean, I try to fucking only go to businesses that treat their fucking servers or their workers ethically and shit. So, like, yeah. Good for you, you're being consistent. Thanks.
But do bear in mind that growing plants, or all plant-based agriculture, involves animal death, not just from pesticides and habitat destruction, but also like the effect of transporting food, the environmental costs, all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, just being alive, dude, like, again, like, you probably step on ants fucking at least once a week. I don't know, like, just being a human being, inhabiting a house, living in a house that was taken away from where animals can live, like, just existing in general does have a negative impact on other things. And again, very sad, but unless we all just line up and off ourselves, it's just something we have to unfortunately come to terms with and try to avoid any exasperation of it. But yeah, dude, just like being alive does make it so that other animals will have difficulty. The fact that we have cities and suburbs and places where animals, especially certain animals, will be either shot or ran out just on sight. Like, just being humans, just existing, makes other life forms miss out on opportunities and chances that they would have got if we didn't exist. That's just part of life, man.
It involves a lot of animal deaths, is what I'm trying to say. Now, of course, the vegan response to this is to say that, yes, growing plants kills some animals, but a lot more crops, a lot more plants are used to feed livestock than to feed human beings. So if we're trying to minimize the amount of animal suffering, we're responsible
This point is a little... Okay, I'm about to say dishonest, but I don't think he is doing that on purpose, actually. That does logically kind of track, but then you also realize that one cow feeds multiple people, and you do get, I'm pretty sure, a lot more nutritional value out of a piece of meat than you would the equal amount of weight in plants. And shit like that. So, like, but that's getting into the diet stuff, dietitian, whatever. And I'm not someone who's going to be like, hey, you should make decisions to be healthy, because I don't do that on a normal basis. Like, you know, I eat what is tasty if it meets the ethical boundaries, but, like, you know, I'm not eating the healthiest thing. I'm also drinking beer and fucking smoking and shit. Like, I get through my day. But other than that, the whole, oh, you're giving it to animals to be killed. Like, yeah, but, like, those animals would die anyway if we didn't give it to them. So, like, you know, death is just gonna happen no matter what. And that's, again, it's... And I'm not using this as a point against veganism, just a thing in general that should be discussed. It's, what do we do with all the animals that are currently in factory farms? And again, I'm against factory farming, but one, it would be wasteful to just throw out food when there are people starving. And two, like, those animals are going to die. So, like, we might as well use what we already have in factory farming to feed people. It's just, I would then get rid of factory farming and only have ethical forms of farming. And then the price of meat would actually naturally go up. And just naturally, meat would be less of a common thing to be eaten, and a lot less animals would be eaten. But again, that's if we get rid of factory farming, and that's something like vegans don't want to acknowledge that there is that whole area of, hey, I'm against factory farming, but still think eating meat is moral. And then they don't want to acknowledge, like, getting rid of factory farming would also solve a lot of the problems that, you know, they use the entire meat industry to, like, you know, fall accountable for, when it's pretty much just factory farming that is the problem. But yeah.
We can either grow some crops, which does kill some animals, and then eat those crops, or grow even more crops, killing even more animals, to then feed those crops to livestock, to then kill those animals, to eat those animals. And it's clear which is going to contribute least to animal suffering and death. So here's the problem. Think of human rights, like the right to life in a human context. If the only way that I could get food in order to stop myself from starving was to go and kill another person, legally or morally, I don't think this can be justified. There might be some ethical theories.
Alright, I'm not one of those people who, like, shames people for having good lives. I think that's silly. I want everyone to have a good life. But when you make a point like that, it's very clear that you haven't been put even remotely close to a position where you have to truly weigh out, like, doing harm to a person, or starving, or seeing, like, a child that you are close to starve, or whatever. Like, you've never truly been put in that position if you can just flat out say no. That is a very difficult question that many people have to ask themselves way more often than I would like to admit as an American, as a person living in a first world country, that's a problem in first world countries. A lot of people have that issue of, dude, I might have to do some shady shit just to like survive, just to eat. And again, I say again when I haven't said this before, but morals, when conflicting with self-preservation, are a silly thing. If you've ever been close to death, if you've ever been put in a situation where you have to die, or you don't have to, or you could die, you're not thinking about morals, nor should you. You're thinking about, how do I survive? And very seldom, like, unless it's like, who gets shot, me or a baby, then sure, then morals trumps self-preservation. But in immediate danger or immediate like need such as that, no. Like, morals is a silly conversation if your mortality is at stake. And that's something that a lot of people do not want to acknowledge or don't understand when talking about morals and philosophy. And then they say things like that. That's just like, all right, are you going to hold to that? Like, if you go starving, you're not going to go and steal food. You're not going to, if you're put in a position where you have to kill to survive, you're not going to do so. It's like, yes, you are. I can almost, or you're at least going to try. Most people will try, and it's not immoral for them to do so. It's just a consequence of life at that point. Sometimes life puts people in situations where it's me or you, buddy, and it's sad, but again, life is a sad endeavor. So, yeah, if you've ever been in that situation and you chose self-preservation, do not feel like you've morally done something wrong to make yourself survive another day. Like, that's what we do as living life forms, is we try to make sure we survive. And yeah, okay, it's the ego, whatever, call it what you will. I think humans are allowed to fucking want to live. That's not morally wrong in any way, nor should it be.
Is certainly like egoism, almost certainly would say so. But I think most people's, at least their ethical intuitions, would say that I don't get to go and murder somebody.
Again, these intuitions, why are you using them as if anyone cares? I don't give a fuck what your intuition is, dude. I've met people with horrible intuitions. Fam, I've slummed, bro. Like, if we're going off intuitions, people are going to be doing some crazy fucking shit. Like, that intuition is nonsensical. It's basically just how you feel inside. And, like, yeah, your intuition while you're not starving, sure, says that. Your intuition while starving will not fucking say that. You want to be fucking talked to like an adult here. If you're starving to death, your intuition will be vastly fucking different than your intuition while you're not starving. Fair a fuck enough? Like, gee, it gets aggravating, dude. Like,
because it's the only way to feed me. Even if it means I starve, that doesn't mean I have the right to go and take someone else's life. Why? Well, potentially because they have this thing called the right to life.
Again, so then you're giving up your right to life, which, again, the right to life doesn't fucking exist, but in your fucking terms of it does exist. You're giving up your right to life because of their right to life, which is not how people in desperate situations fucking act. I'm sorry. And understandably, no one sits there and is like, I guess I'm starving. I guess it's it for me. Like, no, that's not a question when you're in that situation.
They have a right that I can't violate, even if it means that I'm going to starve to death. Let's say I need to murder them to steal their food or something like that. This isn't something we think is justified. If we were to apply that right to life to non-human animals,
in a world where there are many options before having to kill someone to eat, usually, yeah. But when people are in that situation, it's not immoral to act in that way.
Then now consider the animals that are killed in crop production. We'd have to say the same kind of thing. We'd have to say, if the only way for me to eat is to kill all of these animals, then I just can't eat because they have a right to life that cannot be violated. They're not threatening me.
No. Well, I guess that is a logical conclusion you can come to. Or you can come to the conclusion that, yeah, that is sad, but I still have self-preservation. And again, like, that's how I feel about plants. So, yeah, it's sad, but I'm not going to starve. I'd rather live and be a little sad than die on my moral hill of, I guess, just justice and glory. Like, okay.
Me in any way or anything like this. I'm going over to them and killing them in order to produce food to feed myself. So if they have a right to life, it means I can't do that. What does that mean? It means humankind will starve, because as I say, as things currently stand, we can definitely minimize...
Yes. Okay. You will starve unless you grow up and just realize life is sad. Because right now you're essentially taking from one life form because it's less cute. And you use all these words like sentience and blah blah blah, but you're essentially just saying what you perceive yourself to have and see in them, and like that's why we shouldn't do it. But again, is it right to do something to something that doesn't understand what's being done to it? Again, the person in the coma, you can't hurt them. It doesn't make it morally right to do so. Even if they're, someone with no family and friends and aren't promised to come out of the coma. It's still wrong to do harm upon them. And I think we understand that.
Animal death and suffering by eating plants, but we can't eliminate it. We can't get rid of animal death in even just plant-based agriculture. So if they had this right to life in the same way that humans do, we'd be in big trouble. So you could just say that the non-human animal's right to life is a different kind of right to life to a human being. Maybe in a human context, I'm allowed to kill you only if you're threatening me, but in a non-human context, I'm allowed to kill you just if it's necessary for me to survive, or something like this. But if you're going to do that, then you're going to have to offer an analysis of rights that explains why one creature has this kind of right and one creature has this kind of right. And I think
none of them have that right.
I think it also muddies the term right to life and makes it vague and essentially something that changes depending on who it applies to. The whole point of having this system of rights is that, for instance, in human rights, the idea is that if you're a human, you have this right. That's it. No questions asked. Simple as that. If you start saying, well, you get this right and you don't get this right and you kind of get an adapted different kind of version of this right, the whole functional purpose of rights is thrown out the window anyway. So I don't really think it's probably a helpful thing to do to argue that animals have a right to life, certainly not in the way that humans do. I think it's better to say something like they have a right to avoid or to not have inflicted upon them unnecessary or wanton suffering. I think that's a much easier position to defend and would be consistent with our views regarding human beings. But to say that animals have a right to life, I'm not sure I can stand by that. But if you really...
Alright. I mean, I guess that's kind of fair. It's just weird. If they don't have what you call the right to life. And again, my position is the right to life is just a construct amongst a society, and goes no further than that, and can sort of be applied to non-aggressive animals, but again, like, it's the universe doesn't give a shit. Everything's gonna die anyway. I know someone, their response is like, oh, well, can I eat you? Yeah, go for it, dude. Like, I actually don't don't give a fuck. I'm an atheist. When I die, I actually pretty confident it's just all black forever. Have fun with my body. I don't give a shit. Yeah.
I do want to cling on to this idea that non-humans have a right to life in the same way that humans do. I think it's going to be a bit tricky, but you've got two options, maybe, that I can think of. One option is to treat human rights in exactly the same way. So you might say that my neighbor has a right to life, but one of the exceptions, or one of the specified conditions of this, is that if I'm starving, I'm able to go over to them and murder them in order to take their food and feed myself. That would be consistent with what we do to animals in crop production, where we kill them in order to feed ourselves. But I think that's a tricky position to hold, that my neighbor can have a right to life, but one of the specifications of that right to life is that if I'm starving and the only way for me to eat would be to go and kill them, that I'm able to do that. So that's option one. The other option, of course, would be to become a Jain or a fruitarian or whatever it is they call them, the kind of people who just don't kill animals in any context. In its most extreme formulations, these are the kind of people who will stare at a tree and wait for the apple to fall off before eating it because they...
Okay. You're sort of acknowledging the silly people on my side, but yes, some people are so woefully affected by the fact that they need things to die that they will go to the point of damaging their own health to make sure they don't do so. I'm not willing to damage my own health. I'm not willing to advocate that others should do that. And I guess call me like a speciesist, but I'm team human, baby. As long as we got our society, it's kind of humans versus everything else. And until animals can, formulate contracts and give consent on that level, it's kind of, we have to work off implied deals, which is like, it seems fair that if we make sure they're safe for the majority of their life and give them a very good life, it would be ethical to take that life and feed ourselves, extending our own lives. But,
can't yank it off because that would be, I don't know, a violation to the tree or whatever it is they think. I wouldn't recommend this line of...
Not whatever that they think. When people do that to vegans, you would be like, oh, you're just a dick. Like, no. Or whatever they think. Like, I could have done that fucking, 45 minutes ago and just been like, he doesn't want to hurt an animal or whatever the fuck he thinks, and just disregard it. But that's not how the conversation is supposed to be working if you're open-minded and actually, taking things in a good faith manner. Yeah. So there are people like me and like those people who are even more, or just unable to overcome that sad part or sad reality, who do realize all life forms are life forms, and taking or using a life form for our benefit is pretty unavoidable because we need to eat, we need to survive, and unfortunately we need to take from other life forms to do so. So it's just aggravating or whatever, but you're basically pointing out the kooky people on my side and then being like, oh, whatever. When I fucking uploaded this video, I wasn't comparing you to fucking the vegan teacher and being like, oh, whatever, he believes the same exact thing. It's like, you can have the same conclusion and act out and act vastly different. You know what I'm saying? Yes. So
thought, ladies,
you're not equivalent to the vegan teacher. I'm not equivalent to someone who's willing to starve themselves and watch an apple fall off a tree. But I do agree that it is sad that all life, or I as a human have to take from other life forms to survive, whether it be plant or animal.
and gentlemen, because you will become malnourished. Being vegan and being a healthy vegan is perfectly possible, but it can be quite tricky, certainly depending on where you live. Trying to do it...
But also, alright, nah, never mind. I was about to say a point, but I don't know if I completely
without
agree
being
with it.
responsible for any animal death, including animal death in crop production, is completely unrealistic, and you
It's unrealistic no matter what.
will end up being malnourished and ill and probably dead. So I wouldn't recommend that one either. I'd probably go with the first option. Do you ride goofy or regular on a skateboard? Goofy.
Goofy? You ride Nah, I'm pretty sure that just means you ride with your left foot as your dominant foot. Yeah, I don't think anything else is gonna be about veganism. Sure, that's it. And also this video is pretty long. Yeah, vegans. I don't hate you as much as I say I do. I just really hate... Well, okay, when it's just pure bad faith nonsense that upsets me. Bad logic does upset me. Especially when it's like to say that one thing is morally superior than another, when it's not. But other than that, I guess this is a video.